Yes.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to Pushing the Boundaries series. Today, we will push the boundaries of science and our imagination with two beautiful minds here, Dr. Donald Hoffman and Dr. Sinan Canan. My name is Turkan Aydogmus, and I'm here as a moderator today. Currently, I'm an associate professor of
This is the formula that is going to get you more energy, clarity, and focus.
At the Texas A&M University. Sorry about that sound.
Mm-hmm.
And my background is in quantum mechanics and nanotechnology. And like these two beautiful minds, I also have been seeking to understand the reality and consciousness beyond the limit of my perceptions. I feel so lucky and honored to be in this conversation with these two people. And I will be counting on your questions because this is a live meeting. So if you have questions, please send them to me and I will be asking them during the conversation. If you don't know English well enough, if you cannot ask the question in English, please ask it in Turkish. If needed, I will translate it for you. And I'm going to say this in Turkish just for the Turkish audiences. So arkadaşlar, eğer sorularınızı İngilizce soramazsanız lütfen Türkçe sorun. Biz burada çevireceğiz ve Donald'a ve Sinan'a soruları soracağız. Tabii Sinan anlar zaten ama özellikle de Donald'a yönelteceğim. İngilizce soramazsanız Türkçe sorun lütfen. Oldu? Now I'm back to English. We are already pushing our distance boundaries, right? Because I'm in Texas. I live in Texas and Sinan is in Istanbul and Donald is joining us from California. So everybody all around the world globally during this meeting. Excellent. Now I'm going to start introducing Donald Hoffman first. Dr. Donald Hoffman received his PhD in computational psychology at MIT, and he's a professor of emeritus at cognitive science at the University of California, Irvine, and he's author of 120 scientific papers and 3 books, including The Case Against Reality, Why Evolution Hid the Truth from Our Eyes. He received multiple awards, including the Distinguished Scientific Award of the American Psychological Association for earlier career research. He studies consciousness, visual perception, evolutionary psychology using mathematical models and psychophysical experiments. And I'm going to turn to my second guest, Dr. Sinan Canan. I know most of you know him already, right, from Turkey. But let me introduce him. He received his PhD in medical physiology from Medical School of 19 Mayıs University in Turkey. Currently, he's a professor in Üsküdar University Psychology Department, as well as the head of neuromarketing postgraduate program. He's also the co-founder of AçıkBeyin. In English, it's the open brain, open mind, right? Education and consulting company. He has published many papers and books. I'm going to mention just a few of them here. Things to be Forgotten. And in that book, actually, I saw that, Sinan, you mentioned about Donald Hoffman a lot. And then My Changing Brain, Staying Human in Digital Future. And the last series of Humans Factory Settings. First series is the body, second one, relationship and stress, and the third one, pushing the boundaries. Dr. Canan studies behavioral neuroscience, electrophysiology, and evolutionary neuropsychology. So after introduction of my guest, I'm going to turn back to Donald. I'm going to start my first question with Donald. Donald, you wrote a book, Case Against Reality. It's very brave of you, by the way. What is the case you created against reality, and how different your understanding of reality comparing to general understanding of reality? And would you please open it for us a bit? That's so we can understand.
Yes, thank you. And it's a pleasure to talk with you today. The approach that I'm taking is to ask, what do our best scientific theories entail about whether human senses and the senses of other animals report true facts about objective reality? So I don't actually know the answer to the question, but what I do know is what evolution by natural selection entails. And so what I've done with my graduate students and collaborators is to look at the mathematics of evolution by natural selection, and we've discovered that it entails that no sensory system of any creature would ever be shaped by natural selection to see any aspect of objective reality. So that's just a theorem of the theory of evolution by natural selection. One can, of course, ask whether we should take evolution by natural selection seriously. I do, and most of my colleagues do. But that's what I'm doing. And so let me just say a little bit about the logic of evolution and why it leads to that surprising conclusion. It's surprising because most of us intuitively, even amateurs, but even my colleagues who are specialists in evolutionary theory, have this intuition that seeing the truth should make you more fit, right? An organism that sees reality as it is, we think, should have a competitive advantage in the everyday activities of life, feeding, fighting, fleeing, and mating. And therefore, they should be more likely to survive long enough to pass on their genes, which code for these more accurate perceptions. And so our idea is that seeing the truth should make you more fit and pass on the genes for seeing the truth. Now, of course, no one who thinks about this seriously would say that we see all of the truth. I mean, that's of course not the point here, but that we see those aspects of reality that are critical to us to survive in our niche. So when I look and see a red apple sitting under an apple tree, well, I'm not seeing all of reality, but when I see that shape of that red apple, I see its position next to the tree, that is true. And that would be true even if there were no animals with sensory systems to perceive it. That's our intuition. Now, even brilliant colleagues of mine who understand evolution by natural selection very, very clearly and understand that there are selection pressures for us to be self-deceived and to have untrue beliefs and so forth, still often think that our everyday perceptions of middle-sized objects is an exception, that we should probably see some truths there. That's their intuition. So it turns out that we don't have to guess, we don't have to wave our hands around. Evolution by natural selection is now a mathematically precise theory. John Maynard Smith, a British mathematician back in the 1970s, turned Darwin's ideas into a beautiful mathematical framework called evolutionary game theory. And so I decided in around 2008 to study that framework and see what it says about perception. So a couple of my graduate students, Justin Mark and Brian Marion, ran hundreds of thousands of simulations, which made me and them think that we had some evidence that organisms that see reality as it is never outcompete organisms of equal complexity that see none of reality and are just tuned to fitness payoffs. And we can talk a little bit about fitness payoffs. I mean, right now we'll bracket that, but we can talk about what that means. So I decided then to go to a colleague of mine, Chetan Prakash, who is a mathematician. I'm not. And I discussed these ideas with him, and we worked together on a couple theorems. But Chetan proved the theorems, and we published them recently. And the bottom line is this, and then I'll explain what it means. The probability is precisely zero, according to evolution by natural selection, that any sensory system of any organism will report any true structures of objective reality. Precisely zero. So to be concrete, when I look around the world and I see space and time, and I see objects with shapes and colors and motions, all that structure that I'm perceiving, the probability is precisely zero that any of that structure reflects anything about the true structure of objective reality. Precisely zero, according to evolution by natural selection. Now, again, as I said before, I don't know what the truth is here in terms of do we see reality as it is. But what I am saying is that our best scientific theory in this area, evolution by natural selection, clearly entails that the probability is zero. And so that's my attitude as a scientist. Of course, our theories evolve themselves. Presumably, we will find new and deeper theories, and they may have deeper, surprising consequences. But this is where we are right now in science, and so we have to take our current theories quite seriously. So if you want, I can say a little bit about
Well, actually, I want to ask one little thing here. You're
Sure.
not saying that there is no objective reality at all, but you say we cannot directly perceive it because we are actually, imprisoned by an interface. Actually, it's a good thing, not like a prison. So there's an interface. So we just make it up evolutionarily to interact with the surrounding and benefit from it. But if we would see the things as they are, we would have, experienced some problems, you say. Did I understand it correctly?
That's a very important distinction that you're making there. Absolutely, I agree. And so some people have said, well, that I'm a postmodernist, that I don't believe in reality, and that anything goes. And I'm not saying that at all. I mean, again, I don't know for sure anything. But the point of view that I have right now is that there is an objective reality, and that evolution by natural selection entails that we see no aspect of it. Now, there may be a deeper point of view in which we can see parts of objective reality, and I'm looking for such a theory, but we don't have such a theory right now. So I'm not a postmodernist. I'm not saying that I've proved postmodernism is wrong. I'm just saying that that's not the point of view that I'm taking right now. So modesty and humility is required at every point of the way here. All we can do is take our current best theories and push them to the limits and see what they say. But as you said, I agree that evolution has given us perceptions, and they're not the truth. So what are they? And I think that a good metaphor is that they're like a user interface. Like when you're working on your computer and you're writing an email to send to a friend, if the icon for that email is blue and rectangular and in the middle of your screen, it doesn't mean that your email itself in the computer is blue and rectangular and in the middle of your computer, right? Anybody who thought that, I mean, it's just silly. I mean, you have no idea what the desktop interface is really for, or what a computer really is, if you're thinking that. The whole point of the interface is to hide the truth, which in this metaphor is the circuits and software, the voltages and magnetic fields of a complicated computer. Most of us don't want to know anything about that, right? When you're writing an email, you're literally toggling voltages in a computer. But who wants to do that? I mean, you don't want to toggle voltages to write an email. Your friends would never hear from you if you had to toggle the voltages explicitly. So we have these user interfaces with nice little eye candy that makes things very, very easy. We're manipulating objective reality, which in this case is the voltages, even though we're arbitrarily ignorant about the nature of that reality. And most of us don't care about that reality. And that's the metaphor for what evolution did for us. It gave us a user interface. So space and time are like your desktop, or they're like a headset in a virtual reality game. You put on a headset and you have this framework, a virtual space in which you can play the game. That's what evolution gave us. It gave us space and time as a virtual space. For computer scientists, think of it as a data structure, a data compressing, error correcting code that we've evolved to have the information that we need to survive and reproduce presented to us in a compact form. So just like when you play a video game, like if you're playing Grand Theft Auto, but a virtual reality version of it, you have a virtual steering wheel and virtual cars and virtual dashboards, in your car and so forth. You're literally changing the state of some computer somewhere. You're toggling voltages in a computer. That's what you're doing when you play the game. But that's not what you see. You're having fun turning a steering wheel. And so evolution has given us the same kind of thing. We are getting the guidance we need to stay alive, the visuals we need to stay alive. So we see apples, we can eat those. If you see a snake, you shouldn't play with that. If you see a cliff, be very, very careful. So we have to take the items that we're seeing seriously. Evolution shaped them to keep us alive. So we have to take them very, very seriously. But that doesn't mean that we're entitled to take them literally. And so that's the key point. Take everything seriously, but not literally.
Scientifically and philosophically, it sounds very important and actually revolutionary in terms of my personal thinking. But in, standard daily life, will it make any difference to know this theory, to understand this theory? For example, I want to ask you personally. It might be a personal question. You've been working on this like several decades. Is it changing something in you, in your life? Do you see things differently? Do you interpret things differently? What were the comments about that?
It changes me in certain ways and not in other ways, which is quite interesting. So in some sense, when I'm not thinking about this and I see an apple, I just have the knee-jerk belief that there really is an apple and that is true and I'm seeing the truth, right? That's just sort of, so evolution has sort of shaped us just to believe that. And in fact, we know from studies of developmental psychology that we're programmed to have that belief at around 3 or 4 months of age. It's called object permanence, and it gets done to us at about 4 months of age. And so it's not that we, at the age of reason, came to this as a, principled understanding based on everything we know. No, it's something that was done to us, genetically at around age 4 months. And so that's why it's really hard, even though science might contradict it, to get outside of it. But there's another sense in which it has changed me quite a bit, because the view that space and time and physical objects are fundamental, right? The standard story that we've all been told, that the universe began 13.8 billion years ago at the Big Bang, and there it was just space and time and energy and matter, no living creatures, and certainly no consciousness, and then life somehow emerged from inanimate matter and energy, hundreds of millions, maybe billions of years later, and then consciousness emerged later. That whole story, that has consequences, right? That means that consciousness is a product of physical systems. It's not fundamental. It's ephemeral. And so, for example, for humans, it's only when we have properly functioning brains that we will have consciousness. And if our brains are destroyed, then on this point of view, your consciousness is destroyed. So that point of view, that's changing for me, right? Now that I think of space and time from an evolutionary point of view as merely a headset, not the final reality, this opens up all sorts of possibilities that are not only scientifically exciting, but also interesting from a personal point of view. I mean, before I had the point of view that, if my brain dies, that's it. Now I'm open to a whole new set of points of view to explore. And again, I'm not saying that I want to, go into this stupidly, but it allows me to think new thoughts and propose new theories about what might happen after death that I would like to then propose and then study in a scientific framework. So it's not saying anything goes, but it does say that new possibilities that are interesting as a human being open up to me.
Donald, I have a question. When you said that, when you came up with this case against reality, I know you meditate. I know meditation is being in silence for you, because I had chats before and I saw your talks. So how did you come up with this? Was it a research in the lab? You were doing it and all of a sudden, oh my God, or is it something personal experience and moved you to looking into it scientifically? How did it start for you?
Well, on a personal level, I was raised in a family in which both science and a certain kind of religion were part of the family. So my parents both had degrees. My dad had a master's in chemistry, my mom a bachelor's in biology. But my dad was also, and my mom were very much into fundamentalist Christianity. My dad ended up being an associate pastor and so forth. And so I was raised with both, and I saw the tension quite clearly as a teenager between the kind of commitment to logic and reason that I saw from the sciences and data, and a certain kind of faith that I was being told to have that was to be held in spite of any arguments, in spite of any data that might seem to count against it. And so I decided I really wanted to address that tension. And for me, the question as a teenager came to this one question: are we machines? Are people machines? was a very, very clean question. Because if we're machines, then the scientific point of view that I've been raised with, the Big Bang point of view, is right, and the religious point of view is nonsense. And if we're not machines, then it opens up some kind of interesting back and forth so maybe I still don't like the methods of the religious points of view. I don't like the dogmatism, but maybe there's some important insights there that as a scientist I don't want to lose. And so that was sort of so I ended up eventually going to MIT, studying in the artificial intelligence lab. So I was a member of the AI lab at MIT, and also what's now the brain and cognitive science department. So you can see what I was doing. I was trying to understand human psychology and neuroscience, and also what machines can do, what's the best that AI can do. And so I could then understand the question, are we just machines? And so that's sort of the personal side that got me into this. And eventually, though, the discovery that our senses don't show the truth, that came as a surprise. That was not me trying to get there from a religious point of view, for example, at all. It was me. What happened was I was working with Chetan Prakash, and we were trying to figure out a mathematical model of perception. Also Bruce Bennett, the mathematician that we were working with. So Bruce and Chetan and I. And it was the mathematics of perception. We were trying to get a mathematical model of perception that was completely general, that would account for any kind of perception, the fundamental structure. And it was looking at that mathematical structure where the idea first crossed my mind, wow, maybe we don't see reality as it is. Maybe this is all just a virtual reality. So I didn't have proof for it, but I had the possibility opened up to me, and it was stunning. It was only in 2008 that I started to pursue the evolutionary argument to try to see if our best scientific theories could actually entail that point of view.
And let me ask
Turkan.
this one, and
yeah, of course.
Quickly this one, because it goes with it. You keep saying mathematical models, and I want to ask this for everyone. Why do you use mathematical models? Because you're saying all the theories are not real, right? I mean, that's kind of the case. And then why did you choose mathematics? Because maybe for the audiences, this would be a good, just to complete the whole theory, kind of, yeah.
That's an excellent question. There's two important points to make about that. One is that, first, one reason that in science we use mathematics is, from my point of view as a scientist, is to be precise, right? Whenever we put out our ideas, whether it's in science or religion or whatever it might be, we're telling people our ideas, our theories about what's happening in the scientific world or in the spiritual world. And for me, the point of mathematics is simply, let's make our ideas as precise as we can so that we can actually understand, number one, what we're saying, and number two, figure out how we could figure out if we're wrong, right? The whole point from my attitude is to say, of course, I'm probably wrong. I'm trying to put my ideas out there as precisely as I can so that first, you can understand what I'm trying to say, and second, so that you can come back and tell me where you think I'm wrong. And we can then go and do experiments and find out where we're wrong. So that's my attitude about mathematics. It's a way to avoid dogmatism. And I want to avoid dogmatism because if I believe I know the truth, then I'm not open to learn. And I want to be open to learning. And we see this in the sciences. I mean, just an example. In the late 1800s, the late 19th century, many physicists thought that physics was done, pretty much, that Newton's theory was complete, and good, brilliant minds should find some other kind of research. Now, of course, we know that was deeply wrong, but these were not stupid people. These were brilliant physicists who thought this. And the lesson I take from it, we know that that Einstein came along and Planck came along and quantum theory and special relativity and the standard view of Newton, as brilliant and beautiful as it is, has been surpassed. And we should just assume that our current theories, at any time in science and in religion, that our current points of view, as brilliant and compelling as they are probably deeply wrong, and we should just be open to that as just a matter of course, so that we're trying to be precise so that we can state what we think we know now, and then test it and evolve and learn. So that's the first thing about mathematics. But now, in terms of its relationship to the evolutionary argument that I gave, it turns out that the theorems that we have from evolution apply only to sensory systems. They do not apply to logic and reason. So that's an important thing to point out. We have not proven that evolution by natural selection shapes logic and mathematical reasoning to be false. We did not prove that at all. And in fact, here's an intuition about why our current approach couldn't do that. And it comes down to the notion of fitness payoffs. Right. So I do have to say something about fitness payoffs to answer the question. So in evolutionary theory, a key concept are fitness payoffs, and think about them in this way: playing a video game, right? What you have to do in a video game if you want to win is to hunt for points as fast as you can, grab the points, and if you get enough points in a short enough time, you get to go to the next level, right? Well, in evolution, it's a similar thing. You have to go for fitness payoffs, and if you get enough fitness payoffs in a short enough time, you don't go to the next level, but your genes go to the next level. You pass on your genes. You have kids. So fitness payoffs are, good things like eating an apple is good for you. Bad things, playing with a snake and getting bitten, that's bad for your fitness payoffs, and so forth. And so mathematically, fitness payoffs are functions, right? They for a given state of the world, there'll be certain payoffs. Like in a game, if there's some guy that's about to throw a sword at you, that's bad for your fitness payoff, in the game. So you don't want that to happen. And so in evolution, there are these fitness payoffs. Now, we do have to reason about fitness payoffs, right? Evolution needs to shape us to reason about fitness payoffs. If I don't understand that 2 bites of an apple are giving me roughly twice the fitness payoff of 1 bite of an apple, I'm going to be in a worse shape than someone who does understand that. So there will be some modest selection pressures for some modest facility with logic and reason. I'm not saying there's selection pressures for us to be, geniuses at math and logic. This is going to be, just enough to get by. Every once in a while, of course, the genes in some person will come together and you'll get a Kurt Gödel or a John von Neumann, some mathematical genius that we can't understand. And we're all grateful for them because they do help the rest of us. But most of us have hard enough time balancing our checkbooks. And that's what we would expect from this evolutionary argument, that we have some modest facility with logic and reason, but not great facility. But notice, whereas in the case of perception, the evolutionary pressures are uniformly against any truth. In the case of logic and math, they are not. I'm not saying that there are pressures for us to be geniuses. I'm just saying that there are no pressures against some facility. And so that's why your question was a really good one. You can see it's not a trivial answer.
So can I answer it like this? Reasoning and logic and also mathematics probably is the only way that we can reach behind this illusory interface. Can we say that? Because we can use it in the sense that we can understand this interface theory with that logic, for example.
Right. That's a very good point. I would say that I agree with you in the sense that the theorems that we have do not preclude that our logic and reason could be a real insight into the nature of reality. So they don't preclude that on an evolutionary point of view. So they do allow it. Now let me give an opposite argument, right? So an opposite, and again, you can see my attitude about this is my ultimate answer is I don't know. I'm just trying to do the best with the tools we have at hand right now.
Trying to describe all the sides of it. Yeah.
That's right, and sort of the current state of play and what our next moves might be given our current science and religious points of view. And so the state of play, for example, here's a concrete example. If I were the best lecturer in the world, say on mathematics or quantum theory, and I had a room full of macaque monkeys, would I succeed in teaching those macaque monkeys the basics of quantum mechanics or say linear algebra? Well, no matter how good a teacher I am, I probably would not succeed because presumably macaque monkeys simply don't have the concepts needed to understand those topics. And so it's quite possible that our mathematical reasoning and logic and the concepts that we have, even with mathematical reasoning and logic, are inadequate for us to get a true theory of objective reality. I have to countenance that possibility. But there's an even deeper point of view, which is that it may be that there is no such thing as a final description of objective reality. And the reason I say this is from a theorem by Kurt Gödel, right? So it's Gödel's incompleteness theorem, where without going into the details, what Gödel's theorem entails is that no matter how much mathematical structure you've discovered or invented, depending on how you think about it, you've only begun. There's always going to be boundless other mathematical structures for you to explore, in principle. So no one can be omniscient. There's no God, so to speak, who could know all the mathematical truths because, in some sense, in principle, the exploration of mathematical truths is, for fundamental reasons, never ending. And so the idea that we might come to a theory of everything, that's the final word, may be not correct. It may be that what we can do is have a theory of everything that we've explored so far, and then look forward to the next new horizon that we have to go after. And that's more my feeling about how science is going to proceed. And by the way, this is great. It's job security for scientists. It means that we will never come to the end. We will always be exploring new theories. It's humbling. It forces us to be modest, to say our theories are just the best we have so far, and our students will hopefully show us where we're wrong or where we were, just a smaller part of a bigger picture. And so I think that's what we're going to see in science, and I think in spirituality too, that our best current ideas are just our best current ideas, and that we shouldn't be dogmatic about them. We should be humble. I think many spiritual traditions talk about humility, and I think that we should apply that to even the statements of our own beliefs about our spiritual traditions, that we should be in a position of being open to learning, never dogmatic, because dogmatism always stops you from learning. So we should always be open to the next step in learning. So long answer to the question, but yeah, great question.
Well, I want to ask you something, but it's going to be a little bit long. In my culture where I raised, I had some, religious, teachings, and they're generally shared by different cultures around the world. They are like ancient teachings diffused in different cultures. So in Turkey, for example, we mostly hear about Sufism, and in some fundamental teachings of this, they always say this world is an illusion. It's just a playground, but you need to take it seriously. As you say, this is why you strike me so much, because when I go into science, they taught me that everything is about what you see and what you can measure and what you can weigh and so on and so forth. So I try to actually raise two different people inside one, in me, and one is a believer or somebody suspicious, and the other one is trying to understand or figure out the world. But these two are coming together time to time. For example, when I was in college, I was reading Rupert Sheldrake's morphic resonance hypothesis. I just struck by it. And like 5 or 8 years ago, I just come across your speech, your TED Talk, and I just, blown away by it. So time to time, when such ideas come together, I can't help myself by thinking about my culture. But in that sense, there's an important difference from the, origin of those ideas. You said logic and mathematics are helping you in this way to construct your theories. And actually, I followed one of your lectures until the middle of it, and after that I lost it because you started to tell the audience how to conscious agents start to create an objective reality. So you go into mathematical details, and I somehow lost it just in there, but I will pursue to understand this for sure. But when we look back historically, people from Sufism were actually using meditation, inspiration, or intuition, and they come up with quite similar ideas. For example, they talk about curtains between the reality and our minds. And as a way to open up those curtains and figure out the real reality, and they advise you to get rid of bodily needs, get rid of your animal-like desires. So just educate them and control them if you want to see more in this world. If you do not do that, they say, you can live like an animal, but you cannot have fun in this world because you have a mind and you're going to die, and you cannot taste the world as an animal tastes it. So it's actually a big warning. Actually, I take it very seriously, and by years, like 3 or 4 decades, I always trying to find a reconciliation between what I hear from ancient people and what I learn from science. And actually, this coincidence actually tells me some interesting stuff. What are the comments you can make on this? Because the methods are different and the results look the same. What do you say about this?
Yes. So I agree that many religious frameworks are saying something very similar to what I'm saying here, that we don't see reality as it is. And I think that the congruence among this variety of religious frameworks is quite fascinating. I think that they have many deep insights. And so as a scientist, I absolutely do not reject them. The issue is we want to take these ideas seriously, right? And how do we give them the proper respect that they deserve? The proper respect for such ideas is to give them as a precise statement as we can. And they deserve the respect of being stated precisely, not treated dogmatically, because we have to be humble and say, maybe my understanding of this concept, that we don't see reality as it is only partial. And maybe someone from another religious tradition has gotten another insight that I need to balance my insights. And so we need to have this dialogue, a respectful dialogue, where the mathematics, so here mathematics is not about like just to prove that you know more than somebody else because I can write down an equation. That's not the point. The point is precision in what we're saying so that we can figure out where we might be wrong. I'll give you an example I love to use. In the sciences, Einstein had this brilliant idea that was the big idea for gravity. If I'm in an elevator and the elevator all of a sudden starts to go in free fall, I will be weightless in the elevator. Einstein called that the most wonderful idea he had in his life. I mean, it was the big idea for gravity. Well, you could just stop there and go, I would be weightless in an elevator, and that would be a good idea, but Einstein gave that idea the respect it deserved. What did that mean? He spent 7 years trying to take that idea and make it precise. 7 years struggling, learning the mathematics, staying up at night, sleepless, trying to take that idea, wrestle it down, and turn it into something so he could know exactly what his idea was. And after 7 years, he had an equation that equation was the foundation of general relativity.
Okay,
Well,
I will take this part and put red and underlined subtitles for the Turkish audience and publish it every day in 5 times, for example. This is very important. When you find a brilliant idea, don't just satisfy with it. Just work on it.
Absolutely, and that's giving the idea the attention it deserves. And just because an idea has been said the same way in a religious tradition for thousands of years doesn't mean that that's the right way to say it. It means that we should take the idea seriously and give it the deep respect it deserves today, which is to say, push on it from all sorts of angles. Try to make it precise so that you really understand what's going on. And then ask what the other traditions are saying about that same thing. Even if that sounds alien, try to understand it. Because you have to, you probably have only touched part of the elephant, right? That's the point. Now with Einstein, roughly a year after he published his equation, a German scientist, Schwarzschild, played around with the equations and discovered a solution that we now call black holes. And he told Einstein. Now, Einstein had no anticipation that his idea about an elevator and falling in an elevator would lead to the prediction that there are black holes. He didn't like it. So here, and he's Einstein, right? And he's not some stupid guy like Hoffman. He's Einstein. And he didn't understand the depths of his own ideas and what they meant. And so that's the real lesson to us. We take our ideas intuitively and just put them down in a few words. We haven't yet given them the respect that they deserve. When Einstein gave his idea the respect it deserved, the idea came back and slapped him in the face. It said, there are black holes, and Einstein didn't like it. It also said that the universe isn't static. The universe is either expanding or contracting, and Einstein hated that too. So when we give our ideas the respect that they deserve, and this includes not just scientific ideas, but religious ideas, they're going to come back and teach us things that may not be comfortable to us, but we should be their students. And so that's sort of the attitude in which I do this, right? Be precise so that we can find out precisely what our ideas mean, and also precisely where we don't really understand our ideas yet. And I think that as spiritual traditions take this really interesting lesson from science, we will then get a nice evolution of our spiritual ideas. We'll give them the careful attention that they deserve, and then they will come back and become our teachers in a way that we never before understood was possible.
That was beautiful. Thank you very much. Turkan, do you have any question?
Yeah. So I'm going to ask, following up this, do you get reaction from scientists or probably spiritual people like you now, because you're kind of bringing science and spirituality, trying to pull both towards each other, but do you get any reaction from more traditional scientists?
Well, absolutely. And scientists respect a theorem. And one reason that I went after evolutionary game theory and first did simulations and then worked with Chetan Prakash to get a theorem was I understand how science works, and it's correct. Without a theorem, I'm just blowing steam in some sense. I'm saying I don't think we see reality as it is, and they can say, well, I'm glad you don't think we see reality. I think we do see reality, and go have fun. So, but when I come and say, okay, the best scientific theory we have in biology, namely evolution by natural selection, entails as a theorem that the probability is zero that any sensory system has been shaped to see any aspect of reality. Now I've got their attention, right? That's a different story. And so I've been invited to give talks at various universities, including neuroscience talks. And it's a different attitude. It's a respectful attitude. I'm not saying that they necessarily buy all of my interpretations, but there are really good challenges. So, for example, here's an intelligent challenge that I got from a good friend and colleague, Rainer Mausfeld, who's a professor in Germany. Rainer said, in some sense, great theorem, but why are you focusing on natural selection? Evolution is more than just natural selection. There's genetic drift. there's linkage, there's pleiotropy, there's the restrictions in evolution that come from our physical and chemical constituents. We're mostly made out of carbon, nitrogen, and a few other things. So why are you focusing on natural selection, especially, he pointed out, since in evolutionary biology, there's a big debate about the importance of natural selection. There are adaptationists who think natural selection is very, very important. But then there are some like Stephen Jay Gould and Richard Lewontin, very, very brilliant evolutionary theorists, who say that natural selection plays a relatively minor role in evolution. And so this is the kind of question that I get from my scientific peers. This is exactly the kind of question that should be discussed. Notice it's raised the level. It's not about your idea is silly, throwing up. It's now a technical question about the structure of evolutionary theory. My answer to that question is quite simple. For all I know, natural selection plays a small role in evolution. For all I know. That's not been settled. However, when evolutionary biologists do argue that our sensory systems have been shaped to see the truth, they say that it's because seeing the truth will make you more fit. Well, that's a natural selection argument. So, and if you think about it, you couldn't use genetic drift to get the truth, or linkage or pleiotropy. In other words, the only tool in the panoply of tools of evolution is natural selection. And so the reason I and my colleagues focused on natural selection is because that's the only place that we could hope that evolution would have the tools to shape our sensory system to see the truth. And there it's a theorem of evolutionary game theory that the hope is zero. And so, but now you can see when we start to go at this level, instead of having an argument of the level, you think there's no truth, well, I disagree with you, I think there is truth, and just leave me alone. It's not that level anymore. It's here's a theorem. Okay, well, you got that theorem from one part of evolutionary theory. What about the other parts? And so now we have a really intelligent discussion. So it's raised the level of discussion, and we'll all learn in the process.
Yeah. I want to ask you a question, Sinan.
Yes.
Because if what he says is true, right? I mean, meaning like nothing is
actually
real.
If you ask me, what he says is true.
No, it's not that. It's what I'm asking. What I'm going to ask you is, in one of his talks, he says there are no neurons. There's nothing. So where does your research go? Because you're working on the neuroscience, neurons, and all that. So what do you think about
actually,
that?
I was looking for such an opportunity like Donald's provided, because I'm kind of stuck by thinking just neurons, interactions, glial cells, synapses, neurochemicals. There's something inadequate for me to, figure out what makes us human, or what makes a lizard. It's not enough for me to paint a whole picture. My question would be actually the same line actually with Turkan. I am studying with the brain for several decades. I know those brains that I study. I studied a lot of animals' brains, including dogs and chicks and all other stuff. And I saw a lot of brains, but I know for sure as a neuroscientist that the brains that I hold in my hands are actually mere representations of my brain, so to speak, and they're not real. I knew that before I met you. And I was asking this question. I can only work on a mental representation of a brain. So I can only understand what my mental capacity, allow me to understand. So this is actually a fundamental problem with my, gathering of knowledge, of this process of scientific study. So, and you just show up and you say nothing is real, including my brain, including myself. So the thing that I see in a mirror as my reflection is not me. I know that. I'm very convinced about that. But I cannot figure out any way to go forward just from here. As you said in one of your talks, you have a life insurance, okay? So because you know the reality will continue after your death, for example. But this is obvious. We cannot live we cannot live according to such an enlightenment, philosophical enlightenment. But can we change anything? Studying in neuroscience studies, for example, can we look differently? What can we do?
Yes. So it's a clear theorem of evolution by natural selection that any object in space and time that you see is merely your construction, is not objective reality. That includes brains and neurons. Mm-hmm. But this is actually really good news for neuroscience. It's good job security for neuroscience. Mm-hmm. Because what we need to do now is what we have to have is a theory of what objective reality might be beyond space and time. And this is where, again, collaboration between science and spirituality is going to be very, very helpful, right? Because the spiritual traditions have been offering ideas about what might be beyond space and time. Science has the tools to take ideas and make them precise. And so what I'm working on is a theory of consciousness. It's a mathematical model of consciousness. And again, I'm not saying I'm right. The spirit in which I'm doing this is to say I'm proposing something that's precise, and that we can actually look at its dynamics and its predictions, and then evolve it, make it better and better. So it's a theory of consciousness in which there are a bunch of conscious agents interacting. Think like the Twitterverse, where you have a bunch of people tweeting and sending out Twitter messages and people following and so forth. There's a vast social network. Then what is space and time? Space and time is like a visualization tool. So if you're trying to understand what's happening in Twitter, right, there's literally tens of millions of Twitter users, billions of tweets. It's impossible for you to read all the tweets or interact with all the users. So if you want to understand the Twitterverse, you need to have an interface that dumbs it down, that lets you see, for example, what's trending in Turkey versus what's trending in California, or zoom out to what's trending in all of Western Europe, and then zoom down to what's happening in a particular city or a particular house, or a particular user. So you want a visualization tool. So in the picture that I'm developing, there's this vast social network of conscious agents. It's all mathematically defined, and we can look at its dynamics. It's very much like neural networks, the dynamics of agent-based neural networks. That's similar mathematics. And then what we have to do, this is getting to I haven't forgot the neuroscience question, but it takes a while to get there. We have to have a mapping from this dynamics of conscious agents into space and time, a mathematically precise mapping. And that's what I'm working on right now. That's all of my work right now, is defining that map. And I'm trying to make connections with physics, because I think that's the lowest level and easiest. So I'm looking at scattering amplitudes. I'm trying to predict scattering of gluons at the Large Hadron Collider, just to show that I've got the connection all the way. But eventually, what we're going to have to do is show exactly how the dynamics of conscious agents maps into space and time, and then we can look at symbols like neurons and brains and ask, let's pull them back into the realm of conscious agents. What do they refer to back there? In other words, the way we're doing neuroscience right now is I look in the brain and I see neurons, I see synapses, I see sodium, potassium, and calcium ions going through neural membranes. And I assume that that's the truth. Too simple. We have to look at that and say, that's my user interface description. Now let's take that description and pull it back into the realm of conscious agents and ask, what dynamics of conscious agents is being projected into this particular neural circuit? And then we can reverse engineer the circuits in terms of what's really going on in this realm of conscious agents. So you can see why I'm saying this is job security for neuroscience. We're going to need a lot more money and a lot more neuroscientists, because this is hard work. I've just made the job much more interesting and much more difficult. And so we're going to be at this for quite a while. But the point will be that neurons and brains are our specific user interface description, our visualization tool of a deeper dynamics of consciousness. So this deeper dynamics of consciousness will want to interact with the spiritual traditions and use the tools of science to really nail down what's going on there precisely. So that's, but then we'll pull it back into space-time and we'll ask, how do we re-understand physics and chemistry and biology and neuroscience as when we reverse engineer our interface? So here's another way of thinking about this. Science, for the last 400 years, since Galileo, has only studied our user interface.
Yeah, space-time.
Science has not studied objective reality. But by being very, very careful in studying our interface, we've developed the precise tools that we need for this moment in human history where we wake up to the fact that the spiritual traditions have been telling us for a long time, but science is now waking up to the fact that space-time is not fundamental, and that science has the tools to explore what is the reality beyond space-time. And so it's a really exciting moment. The tools have been sharpened, studying space-time. We're ready to apply them, jumping out of space-time, and we're now ready to collaborate with spiritual traditions who have been telling us that there is something beyond space-time, but they don't have the tools that science has. So this is a case where we can all win. We can learn from the tools of the ideas of the spiritual traditions, the tools and insights of science, and work together. But it requires a humility, a willingness to be wrong, and the persistence that Einstein had, where he started with the idea of falling elevators, and 7 years later, after many sleepless nights and hard work and learning, he turned it into a real theory. That's what we need to do now with some ideas that have been around for thousands of years in spiritual traditions. We need to do what Einstein did, take them very seriously and give them their due respect.
This is very, very exciting for me because at least in the past 3 years, especially in this YouTube channel, the name of the YouTube channel is AçıkBeyin, as Turkan stated. It means the open brain or open mind. Actually, what we advocate, like in the past 3 years, we are trying to bring together the latest science and the ancient wisdom and also spiritual teachings into the same table. And actually, I am trying to encourage people that is doable. We can do it because there is no formal rule that prevents us to do this. Actually, we need to try this because in science, we have a very limited understanding of reality. But in the ancient knowledge, we have a lot of things, but we need to just pick them for the best. And we need, set of people courageous enough to sit on that table and do the job. So actually, I'm very, very glad that you said that. I'm feeling something in this young generation. They continuously ask me several questions about those subjects, how we can merge those different realms into together. And Turkan, if you allow me, I will ask one more related question. In this book, this is my third book actually, its name is Things to Forget or Things We Forget. It means unutulacak şeyler. And in this chapter here, the chapter's title is in Turkish says, the interface that we call the world. It's actually a very brief summary of your ideas. It's only 6 pages long, just 6 pages, but probably those 6 pages are the most questions part in my book. People continuously ask me questions about your interface idea, and the most frequent question that I've been asked about this is, if this is an interface that we are facing right now, can we change it as we change our desktop? When people ask me this, I generally say, did you fall in love before? And if they say yes, then you know what it is, because the one day before it, the birds was actually just making some sounds, but when you fall in love, they sound like a song to you. Okay, the things started to change. But can you give us any other feasible examples? Can it be changed if it's an interface?
Yes, and I just want to agree with you about what you said about the younger students, the younger generation, and the wanting to do this. I would say it's all sorts of open possibilities for them. If someone is a young, brilliant, has all sorts of interesting ideas about spirituality, and wants to really push them forward, learn a ton of mathematics.
Please.
Learn some deep science, like physics or chemistry. Learn those tools, and then come back and apply those tools to the ideas that you think are the central ideas in your spiritual tradition, and start to turn them into precise mathematical statements. And that's how we're going to give those ideas the respect and serious consideration that they deserve. And of course, some of our ideas will be shown to be wrong in certain ways or need to be changed in certain ways. That's part of the whole apparatus and the whole process. But now, yeah, in terms of this interface idea, and could we change the interface? Think about it this way. Suppose that you are a wizard at a game like Grand Theft Auto. And everybody that plays the game is just so impressed with how, all the tricks and they can't win because you just know all these tricks. Well, that's great. What you've learned is how to use that interface. But now suppose that you're some geeky software engineer that wrote the program. Well, now you can, if you wish, make the wizard look terrible. You can take the gas out of his tank. You can give him a flat tire. You can change the structure of the roads. You can do stuff that from within the game looks like magic. And so science, up until now, has been a careful study of our interface, but we've been stuck in the interface. We've assumed that space and time were fundamental. Physicists are now saying space-time is doomed. It's not me. This is the physicists who are saying space-time is doomed.
The quantum physicist, yeah.
That's exactly right. Like Nima Arkani Hamed and others. David Gross has said this. Several have said this, but it's not just a few. It's sort of a big trend in physics to realize that space-time has been assumed to be fundamental. It's not anymore. So they're finding structures beyond space-time. So Nima and his collaborators have found something called the cosmological polytope and the amplituhedron and associate. They're finding structures that are beyond quantum theory. They have no Hilbert space, no obvious Hilbert spaces. They're beyond space-time. They have symmetries that cannot be just captured in space and time, dual conformal symmetries and so forth. And they allow you to compute, for example, scattering events at the Large Hadron Collider correctly with far less effort than methods in space and time. Using Feynman diagrams, if you look at like 2 gluons smashing in and 5 gluons smashing out, Feynman tells you, here's several hundred pages of algebra you need to compute for one event. With these new structures that have symmetries that have never, that you can't see in space-time, you can do it in 2 or 3 little terms that you can write down. You can write down the answer in 2 or 3 terms, not hundreds of pages of algebra. So you get symmetries that you can't see in space-time, and the math becomes simple. It lets you know, hey, wait. Space-time has been a really good framework, but there's something really good behind space-time that's really exciting. There's symmetries out there, and the math gets simple. We need to go out there and find it. What's going to happen then is we're going to see these structures behind space-time, see how space-time emerges from those structures. And what I'm up to is looking at how this dynamics of consciousness actually gives rise to the structures that the physicists are finding. The deepest structures that physicists are finding are these things called affine permutations. And what we're finding is how to get affine permutations from the dynamics of consciousness as a data compression technique. So if we compress our dynamics of consciousness in a certain way, we get these affine permutations. So that's the hope. Consciousness is the fundamental dynamics. It leads to affine permutations, which then lead to cosmological polytopes and amplituhedron, which then goes all the way into space and time. So we have this thread that goes all the way from consciousness, mathematically precise, into our interface. Then we can reverse engineer it. Once we reverse engineer it, we can be like the guy that can play with the software of Grand Theft Auto, right? Who can go and take gas out of the tank. We should be able, finally the answer to your question, I think that we will be able to play with the very parameters of space and time themselves. They're just a data structure. If we think of them as the objective reality, of course we can't play with it. We're stuck inside the reality. But if we're the software engineers who can play with it, then all of a sudden we should be able to change how we transfer ourselves through space and time. We should get new forms of warping space and time, and maybe we can go directly to Alpha Centauri without having to go at the speed of light through space to get to Alpha Centauri. So I think the technologies that are going to come out of this are going to be mind-blowing. So it'll revolutionize neuroscience, job security for neuroscience. It will also let us play with space and time themselves.
It sounds like a fancy sequel to the Matrix, bending the reality with the equations. Very nice to hear that. Turkan?
I want to actually ask a few questions from the audiences. I am getting really nice questions here. We had some questions about math. Muhammad Rifat, Aybar's marriage. They're asking, let me try to, Aybar's marriage is asking, mathematical perception study has a selective or non-selective, meaning subjective or objective nature, or both of them. What do you think about that? And also, is math something we discovered or we just made it up, right? And what if math is not, right? So I think you gathered a lot of information about that, but I'm still passing the questions if you want to add anything. And there are other questions about artificial intelligence. Gürkan Yetkin, what do you think about
artificial? Let me do the math first, okay. Then we'll go to the
then
AI.
I'll go. Yeah, go ahead.
So the mathematics question is an incredibly important, deep question, and I'm sure that my ideas right now will have to be revised, but let me tell you what I'm thinking right now. And then I would love for the next generation to prove me wrong and move on. Okay. When we study consciousness, and there's a field called psychophysics where we actually study consciousness, and I've been involved in it. What we find is, in psychophysics, we study both experimentally and then we try to model what we're finding. Every conscious experience has a mathematical structure. So consciousness and mathematical structure are not divorced from each other. They're intimately related. I don't know exactly what the relationship is, but the way I think about it is like the bones to an organism. So if we're vertebrates, we have to have bones, but we're more than just our bones. And that's the way conscious experiences seem to me. And they seem to have a mathematical structure, but they're more than just a mathematical structure. Now, and to make that precise is something that we need to work on. So that's an open question. Whether we invent or discover mathematics is a really interesting one. And whether the mathematics that we have is true or not is interesting. And there I turn to Gödel's incompleteness theorem. In some sense, all the math that we know right now is trivial compared to the math yet to be known. And that will always be the case. Gödel assures us that will always be the case. So there is a sense in which we know always that much of the truth. When my fingers are touching. So there's a sense, and yet I have the intuition that nevertheless what we know is valuable and non-trivial. And the question about whether we're inventing or discovering, I wonder if they're both true, in the sense that it may be that if consciousness is fundamental, right? So here's again, this is an if statement, right? So if consciousness is fundamental, and that's all that reality consists of is consciousness and its structures, then mathematical structure is only about the possible varieties of conscious experience. That's what it's about. And in that case, Gödel's theorem tells us that there's this infinite variety of possible kinds of conscious experience to explore. And so for the question of what is consciousness up to, if consciousness is fundamental, why is it doing anything as opposed to nothing? And what is it doing? I mean, I don't know, but here's one possible answer. I call it Gödel's candy store. There's this infinite variety of conscious experiences to explore. And so that's what consciousness is doing. And the reason why it hasn't stopped is Gödel assures us it will never be done. It, in principle, can never be done. So now this possibility of exploration, where consciousness is exploring all the varieties of consciousness, is also intrinsically exploring all the varieties of mathematical structure. So now the question is, are we inventing the new structures or discovering them? And I begin to think that that division now is not so clear, that what consciousness is doing is the joyful invention, discovery of all these new structures and possibilities of consciousness. And again, I just put that idea out there. I don't want people to take what I've just said as the gospel. I would like to take people to take that as a challenge to come up with a deeper statement than what I've come up with. So my statement is just to, for example, inspire young thinkers to say, I can do better, and please do better. So that's my best. Now, please outdo it, please.
Donald, I realized something from the beginning of the conversation. Probably you are the the only person that I can ask this question to ask fairly. What is consciousness? How do you define that? Because you construct everything on consciousness, but I don't know the description of it from your perspective.
Great question. And so I should say what an answer to a scientist means too, right? So scientists, what we do is we propose theories, as you well know. And a scientific theory never explains everything, right? It has assumptions. And the assumptions of a theory, that sounds technical and clinical. And I'll put it this way. Every scientific theory has miracles. We call them assumptions. That makes it seem not so bad. But they're the miracles that where we say, this is where scientific explanation stops. But if you grant me these miracles, I can explain all this other wonderful stuff.
Like the beginning of life, for example. If you give me the beginning of life, then I can have you the biology. Okay?
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. If you give me life, then I can use evolution by natural selection to tell you about speciation. But natural selection doesn't tell me where life came from. Yeah. Right. That's assumed. That's actually, by the way, an open problem. Right? We don't.
Yeah.
I highly recommend The Demon in the Machine by Paul Davies. A wonderful book, Demon in the Machine. If you want to be blown away, we don't know how to go from chemistry to biology. That is really, really a big open problem in science. So you're absolutely right. And that really points to this thing that each scientific theory makes assumptions. Now, as we go along, someone will say, well, I can make a deeper assumption, and then your assumptions are now a consequence of my deeper assumptions. And that's how science works. But now you've got a new set of assumptions. You never have an assumption-free theory. So now to your question. When we come to a theory of consciousness, as a scientist, what I'm going to have to do is say, first, what's the rough domain that I'm talking about in consciousness, right? So I'm thinking about things like, the taste of chocolate. That's an example of a conscious experience. The smell of garlic, a headache. There are higher levels, like my sense of me being a self and being self-aware. And then maybe spiritual notions like enlightenment. So there's a higher notion of consciousness. So you can imagine all these kinds of levels of consciousness that intuitively we would like to have a theory that explores. So as a scientist, the question I have to answer is, what shall I take as my miracles? Ultimately, I need to explain learning, memory, problem solving, intelligence, the sense of self. All of that stuff is going to have to come out of this, right? But what is the minimal set of miracles that I'm going to have to boot up a theory of consciousness? What I've chosen, I have two miracles. And for people who are interested in pursuing the mathematics, I've got a paper called Objects of Consciousness. So if you Google my name, Objects of Consciousness, it's free, it's online, you can just read it for yourself. But the two miracles are, there are conscious experiences. So I mean simple things like the taste of chocolate, the smell of. So instead of saying space and time and matter are fundamental, I'm saying the taste of chocolate, the headache, these kinds of experiences, light versus dark, red versus green, these are the fundamental furniture of the universe. And second, that these fundamental conscious experiences inform or guide choices. And what these choices of actions, which affect the experiences of other conscious agents. So a conscious agent is an entity that has experiences, and based on those experiences, chooses how to influence the conscious experiences of other agents. So it's a network of interacting conscious agents. Now I've chosen that because it's trivial. It's the simplest thing I could come up with. There's no notion of self, no notion of learning, memory, problem solving, intelligence. None of that's assumed. I have to build networks of conscious agents that do learning, memory, problem solving, that build a self. I have to construct them. So I've made all the hard work ahead. I've had the miracles be as little as possible, but here's why I'm optimistic. I'm not saying I'm right, but I'm optimistic. It's provable that the mathematics that we've written down, that Chetan, Prakash, and my collaborators I have written down, using probability spaces for the set of experiences and Markovian kernels for how they influence other experiences, it's provably computationally universal. In other words, our networks of conscious agents can do anything that any deep learning network can do. Any computer could do. So it's computationally universal. So we're proposing a new language of conscious agent networks. And conscious agent networks then is the new framework. It's a programming language for us to build our theory of consciousness. What do we mean by self? Let's build conscious agent networks that are selves. And that's how we're going to figure out what a self is. What is learning and memory and problem solving? We'll build agent networks that do all of this from the fundamental miracles of conscious experiences and elementary decisions. I think also that there'll be a theory of free will, a non-trivial theory of free will that comes out where it's not just that all these agents are interacting in a vast social network. Agents interact and combine to create new agents. So there's going to be a really complicated interaction, and free will. Each agent will add its little piece of free will choice to the whole dynamic. So you're not ultimately completely free, but you have some genuine freedom, but not total freedom. So it's going to be fun. And that will be, again, a mathematical model of free will. It's not a hand wave. I'm expecting a multi-level, precise mathematical level with top-down and bottom-up influences of free will. So I'm really excited to pursue it.
Well, while you were telling this, I can't help myself from imagining the self-organizing systems in the natural world. The chaos theory continues to state that if the consciousness is fundamental or the building block of what we experience here, then those inanimate systems, the non-living systems actually, can use energy, generate or emerge some patterns and do some clever stuff or intelligent stuff. Maybe they are displaying some form of consciousness. If I look from your angle, then I can see some primordial signs of consciousness when I look to a chaotic system, for example, a self-organizing system. And if it goes one level higher, it forms cellular colonies or ant colonies and these fish flocks, whatever. So this just actually I'm not just thinking this. So there's a level-like structure that consciousness actually manifests itself in more and more organized manners. So did I understand it correctly? I thought something like that.
Yes, you're on the right track. There's one little change that I would make that makes a big difference, and that is, remember that where you see everything through a user interface, and that interface is dumbing things down.
Yes.
So the distinction that we make, for example, between living and non-living is not a fundamental distinction. If consciousness is fundamental, there is no fundamental distinction between the living and the non-living. That is an artifact of the limitations of our particular user interface. It has to dumb things down. At some point, it dumbs things down so much that we see nothing about consciousness or what we call life. So you're absolutely right to say that we look and we see chaotic systems, we see self-organizing systems. We should use those clues that we're seeing within our user interface as guides, because I think that that's true, that in this realm of conscious agents, agents interacting self-organize and create new conscious agents. But what we have to be careful about is when we go to the parts where our interface is giving up, we're assuming that the reality itself is getting simple. No. Reality is we're still interacting with self-organizing systems, but all I see is a stupid rock. Well, it's not because I'm interacting with something that's stupid. It's because, of course, I had to give up. Of course, my interface had to dumb things down. So that's the only change. But your insight is absolutely right.
A note for myself, actually, don't exclude yourself while thinking about the world, because this is your interface. So you should consider yourself as the main unit that's experiencing.
I absolutely agree. So this is what spiritual traditions have been telling us in meditation and so forth. We should pay attention to what's going on, and by the way, also the chaos of emotions and the craziness of what's going on there, and the multiple voices that you might hear. I mean, pay attention to that. That could be a real. I mean, you're not just one agent, according to the work that I'm developing. You are a whole network of interacting conscious agents, and as you know, as a neuroscientist, from the split brain work, we have clear evidence of the multiple consciousnesses. I mean, this is debated. I say there's clear evidence. Some of my colleagues would debate with me, and that's fine. But from my point of view, so Joe Bogan, who was a surgeon, took a scalpel and would cut the corpus callosum, which is a band of fibers, 200 million, 225 million axons that sort of make the left hemisphere and right hemisphere in contact with each other to communicate. He would cut those, not just for fun. It was for people with epilepsy, and it was to help them out. But what we found is that after people had gone through that surgery, the left hemisphere and the right hemisphere had different contents of consciousness. You could have the left hemisphere being aware of the word ring, and the right hemisphere being aware of the word key, and no one was aware of the phrase key ring. In one person, the right hemisphere was an atheist, and the left hemisphere believed in God. Right? So you had different religious beliefs, and the left hemisphere and one guy wanted to be have a desk job as a draftsman. The right hemisphere wanted to be a race car driver. So there are different consciousnesses with different personalities and even different religious beliefs inside your own head, so to speak. And that's just the tip of the iceberg. If the theory I'm working on is correct, those two conscious agents themselves are, in fact, a whole hierarchy of interacting conscious agents. So as in spiritual traditions, you meditate and you look inside and pay attention to what's coming up, you're seeing at top level the complexity of who you really are. That insight then, tied with mathematics, can then start to let us really understand who we are. So once again, we see science and spirituality. Yes, pay attention to the complexity of your inner conscious world. And then, if you're a young, talented person with mathematical talents, take your insights, put them into mathematics, give them the respect that they're due, do the simulations, do the theorems, go back and forth between your meditation and your mathematics. And that's how we will make progress.
By the way, in my culture, there is a very famous saying that you should get rid of yourself in order to be with the universe. And it's generally depicted as a kind of nothingness. Nothingness doesn't mean that you should kill yourself. You should kill your living body. Actually, you should abandon what you call as I, separated from this world. And actually, what you're saying is resonating in that sense. We are actually, bounded in a whole. It's like a big, giant, conscious ocean. And inside it, we are connected somehow. But with our understanding, daily understanding, earthly understanding, we just feel separated. We perceive ourselves separate beings. But when you say something like this, obviously, as a trained scientist, I should ask, if everything is consciousness, where is the consciousness of the pen or pencil or book or whatever? So how can we touch the consciousness in those, as I must say, inanimate matter? So how do we do that?
So great questions. So in terms of, say, the pen, I would not say that the pen is conscious or that there's any consciousness in the pen. But I would also say that my body is not conscious and there's no consciousness in my body. My body is just a symbol, right?
Okay, this is not a pen. I forget this all the time. This is not a pen. This is an icon for me.
It's an icon. There you go. As soon as you realize it's an icon, it's your dumbed down symbol. You're interacting with consciousnesses, and the best you can do is come up with a pen. So there's a theory called panpsychism, which says that physical objects like electrons and certain other more complicated objects have consciousness. I'm not saying that. This is not panpsychism of that form. There's various forms of panpsychism. That form in which there are physical objects that in addition have consciousness in them, like maybe a pen or an atom or something like that. No, the icons are just your icons. They don't have consciousness in them. And when I look at you, right, I'm seeing just a symbol on my screen, but even if I were there in person, the body that I would see is just my icon. If I look away, I delete that icon. Your consciousness still persists. I didn't delete your consciousness, but I deleted the icon that I'm using. So we're not saying that rocks are conscious or anything like that. But there is this issue of of the self that you raised, and meditation practices about going beyond the self. If this Girdle's candy store idea is on track, then consciousness is about this endless exploration of new possibilities. Here I am in a particular body that I call Don Hoffman, in a particular interface that I call space and time, and I'm having fun exploring this part of the candy store. In meditation, when you let go of all thoughts, you are letting go of the current part of the candy store that you're in, and you're perhaps opening yourself up to the possibility of further exploration, to new parts of the candy store. Think about it this way. I think about it like metamorphosis of a caterpillar into a butterfly. It sounds all fun and games, right? I was a caterpillar, now I get to be a butterfly. How wonderful. Well, actually, from the point of view of the caterpillar, it's not so wonderful. It turns out when the caterpillar goes into chrysalis, there's a war that goes on inside. The immune cells of the caterpillar fight the cells that are responsible for the transformation into a butterfly. And the transformation only happens when the immune system is overwhelmed, at which point the body of the caterpillar liquefies. Now that cannot be fun. Your feet are turning into goo. Your body is turning into goo. Everything that you know is dissolving. I can't imagine that this is just fun and games, and the immune system fighting it suggests very strongly it's not fun and games. But eventually, the body of the butterfly emerges, and new possibilities that would never even conceivable from the point of view of the caterpillar come into play. In meditation, people who meditate seriously know it's not all fun and games. When you are really in silence for extended periods of time, it's painful. It feels like everything that you know is liquefying, and everything that it hurts. And yet, new structures are being formed, and you're getting ready to perhaps explore new parts of this candy store. And the exploration will never end. So there's always going to be the exhilaration, the fun of exploration, and also the terror of death to what you already know. We always cling to what we know. And maybe that's part of the whole dynamics of consciousness is at every stage, we once again have to learn to let go of what we've already learned, let go of dogmatism, and be opened up to the next level of exploration. So once again, science and spirituality are not at odds. They have a complementary story.
Sinan, can I take a little bit here to pass our audience questions?
Yes.
And it relates to what we're talking about as well. Burak Akçakanat says, asking, can we put ourselves in the center of reality and decide on it? And I want to add to this something. if I can figure out, like you said, if there's one consciousness, maybe, this is maybe, we don't know. And then I figure out the source code and I know how to use my headset. I can take it off. And then now, can I be anything? Can I be a rock? Can I be something else? Or can I experience the things that I want to experience if I know how to use that source code? Maybe Burak is trying to ask, maybe similar, I don't know, Burak Akçakanat. He says, can we put ourselves in the center of reality and decide on it, what to do with it?
Another question that I frequently hear, by the way.
Yeah.
Well, that's the kind of question that I think is really important. And of course, within the framework of space-time, and your consciousness is just what your brain does, the only way to change your reality is to fiddle with your brain, right? But this other framework says that no, there could be very, very new and deeper tools that could allow us to play with space and time, our reality, very, very fundamentally. So I would say this. My guess is, yes, in this new framework, we are going to have new tools that are mind-blowing. But we have to now do the hard work of actually writing down and studying this dynamical system of conscious agents and seeing the exact mathematical mapping into space-time and reverse engineering it. Then and only then can I give a precise answer to this question. So my general answer is, I think so. But the proviso is, your generation needs to run with this and answer the question. I will read your papers hopefully in 20 years and find out from you what the real answer to this thing is. And I'm excited to learn from you.
But let me give you a hint. Most of these questions are coming from the idea that, can we do this effortlessly just by ourselves without writing down those equations? But it's not possible. If it is possible, Donald would do this. He would not play with all these equations for decades. So it's not that easy. You should first study. You should first dig into it, and you'll get the treasure, probably.
Yeah, I would agree. I'll just say one quick thing. Think 200 years ago, 150 years, Maxwell is working with electromagnetism, Faraday is playing with the experiments and so forth. I come along and I say to you, you know what? Good stuff. Doing what you're doing, you can talk with someone in Turkey. If you're in California, you can talk with someone in Turkey immediately and they'll know exactly what you're thinking. And they go, really? Wow. Then I say, oh, just one little proviso. You need 150 years of hard work to turn what you're doing into real mathematics, and then you'll be able to do it. And that's what I'm saying here, right? Is that we have to, get ready. I think it's possible, but it may be 150 years of hard work. Let's get at it.
Awesome.
So, Donald, I have here really nice questions again. I don't know how long time you have, but let me ask those questions again. James LaRue, he's asking, what are your thoughts on altered levels of consciousnesses? You've talked about meditation. What about dreams or drug-induced states? Obviously, people try a lot of those, right, to pass the limitation of their perceptions. And we can even come to the death after that. I mean, because what is death then? If I can control my VR goggles, right, my own, can I actually play with the death now? Maybe that becomes nothing after that. It's just a change of state or something. What do you think? All these questions, yeah.
Right. So with drugs, there's an interesting question. I mean, I have talked with many people who have spent a lot of time experimenting with drugs, like especially 5-MeO-DMT and similar drugs, ayahuasca, and they report similar experiences, and they seem to get insights, and in fact sometimes have guides that then they revisit the same guides over and over and seem to be led through all sorts of intelligent pathways of knowledge. I am open to both possibilities, that you're just screwing up your brain,
yeah,
or that you are in fact getting in some serious contact with this realm of conscious agents beyond space and time. And I think the only way to ultimately answer this question, well, first I'll put it this way. If I was a physicalist, the answer is real clear. You're addling your brain. You're screwing up your brain. That's That's what's going on here. There's no deeper realm of conscious agents. You're hallucinating. But this realm in which consciousness is fundamental opens up the possibility that some of this is real, genuine insight. And so now, as I said before, the hard work is for the next generation to actually get a model of consciousness and its projection to what we call the brain. When we have 5-MeO-DMT, that's a chemical. So that's a user interface symbol. What does that symbol correspond to in the realm of conscious agents? When that symbol is interacting with neurons and causing my perceptions to change in the physiological sense, pull that back. What are we saying is happening in the realm of conscious agents? That will then tell us the deeper answer to this question. So in other words, I'm saying we should develop the tools where we can give this answer the question the answer that it deserves, right? The kind of serious attention that it deserves. And I don't know how the answer will come out. And so there's hard work to be done. In terms of life after death, again, a physicalist framework makes it very, very clear. Your brain dies, your consciousness ends. The framework that I'm talking about here leaves it quite open that some form of your consciousness survives. I don't know if your self survives, because I don't yet know what a self is, right? Self is going to be some kind of structure that I think is created. And so I don't know the answer to that. So consciousness will survive. Will it be recognizable as me? Maybe, maybe not. But I would recommend there is Sam Parnia, who's an MD at the Langone Center, Medical Center in New York. He's got a video at the New York Academy of Sciences. And I can send you guys a link to it later on. But he's got a video where these MDs are looking at patients who they've revived, who have been dead, with no EEG, no heartbeat, for half an hour, 45 minutes or longer. The technology is now there to bring these people back. And they provide hair-raising tales of what they're seeing. And again, I'm not saying that we should take their reports at face value. We should take them as interesting evidence of the possibility of life after death and perhaps survival after death. But even more important than that is, for me, non-dogmatism. That for me, of all the things we've talked about today, I would say the most important are be precise and never be dogmatic.
This is what we call the open brain, actually. Thank you very much for describing this. What does it mean to be an open brain? Thank you very much. Actually, I'm receiving private messages right now, or WhatsApp or something. They're telling me you've blown our minds. Actually, I thank Turkan, first of all, for
yes. I'm getting all kinds of messages that really nice talk, and then questions. I cannot even insert those questions in there, but if we have a little more time, Donald, I'm going to check with you. But there are some questions about artificial intelligence, like Gürkan Yetkin, what do you think about artificial intelligence? Okan Aydın asking, how are we close to an AI which works like a human brain? So if you compare the two, for example.
And you have, I believe you have a statement about artificial intelligence or any kind of algorithm cannot generate consciousness. I remember something like, is it correct?
Could I step up for just a couple minutes and then I'll come back and
of course, we can give a little break. By the way, when we send you, we talk a little bit about Turkish audience right now.
Yes. Yes.
Okay. Yeah. Türkan'cığım tekrar teşekkür ediyorum valla. Bu arada arkadaşlar ara yorumlarda görüyorum. Bu videomuza daha sonra altyazılar da ekleyeceğiz. Ve bu altyazılarla inşallah buradaki hakikaten zihin zınklatıcı konuşmanın detaylarına İngilizce bilmeyen arkadaşlarımız da vakıf olabilecek. Dolayısıyla bugün çok önemli mevzular geçiyor. Ben tekrar Türkan'a buradan teşekkür ediyorum. Vesile oldu böyle güzel bir buluşmaya. Sağ olasın. Sen nasıl buluyorsun? İyi gidiyor mu?
Evet. Ben teşekkür ederim. Ben burada çok güzel sorular alıyorum, görüyorum. Buradan bana da geliyor. WhatsApp'ıma da geliyor. Buradaki arkadaşlarımdan filan. Ama muhabbet öyle güzel gidiyor ki arada da kesmek istemiyorum. O yüzden tam bağladığımız yerlere koymak istiyorum.
Aynen.
Çok bu arada tabii Donald'ın ben başka konuşmalarına bakıp buradakilerine bakınca aslında bayağı açıldı. Cevaplar falan gayet
çok sağ olsun. Çok içten Çok güzel cevaplar veriyor. Herhalde 2-3 oturum daha yapsak beraber uçacağız gibi bir his var içinde. Çünkü zaten hani kafa yapısı olarak da uğraştığı konularla ilgili bak bambaşka bir kültürden falan geliyor ama tabiatın derinliğine nüfuz eden insanların hep aynı endişelerde buluşması ne kadar güzel bir şey. Yani kalbi açılmış, gönlü açılmış, zihni açılmış ve diyor ki dogmatik olmayın. Yani ona da bakın, buna da bakın. Geldik gidiyoruz. Yani mesajlar çok net. Ben o yüzden çok çok mutlu oldum tanıştığımıza ve konuştuğumuza. Bundan sonraki konuklardan da benzer bir muhabbet alacağımıza eminim.
Anladım.
Şimdi şey yapmayalım ama büyük yine böyle bilim dünyasının selebritileriyle burada buluşacağız. Sevgili Turkan'la yardımlarıyla inşallah.
Bu arada başında belki İngilizce bilmeyen arkadaşları da söyleyelim. Donald'ın babası rahip. Yani çok bayağı kuvvetli bir şey oluyor. Hristiyanlık öğreniyor aslında ama aynı zamanda da bilim adamları. Yani biri chemistry, biri biyoloji galiba. Kimya ve biyoloji okuyorlar filan ama yani çok öyle bir geçmişten gelmesine rağmen değil mi? Geçmişi yani hem bilim var hem kuvvetli bir din öğretimi var. Evet, sonunda geldiği sonuç fazla dogmatik olmayın değil mi? Araştırın diyor yani açık olun, araştırın ve sonunda hepimiz aynı yere geliyoruz yani. Evet, Donald.
Welcome again.
I got one more question about AI and I want to put that here. So we are talking about AI. Can we copy human type consciousness to machine with some algorithms, with some complex mathematical approaches in the future? What do you think about this too? Of course, we're going to open the whole AI subject now.
So there are two frameworks in which we can try to think about that question, right? So the standard framework that my colleagues take, who are physicalists, is to say that consciousness arises from complex physical systems. It emerges from complex physical systems. The brain, for example. The brain is just a carbon-based machine. And so we have evidence that carbon-based machines can create consciousness. So why shouldn't silicon-based machines be able to create consciousness, right? A machine is a machine. If one machine can do it, another one can do it. So from that framework, it would seem that there's no principled reason why we couldn't build an AI that has human-like consciousness. Now, of course, the one problem with that whole framework is, number one, I think it's false that space and time are fundamental, and that therefore that machines like protons and neutrons and electrons or complex versions of those machines like neurons are fundamental and create consciousness. And moreover, none of my brilliant colleagues, and these are my good friends and colleagues who are trying to show how brains create consciousness, they have utterly failed to show how neural activity could create even one specific conscious experience. This is called the hard problem of consciousness. So that's one framework, and I would say 95 to 99% of my colleagues are in that framework, and they would answer the question, yes, it just will take a little while for us to figure out how machines create consciousness. Now, from this other point of view, in which consciousness is fundamental, then the AI and consciousness question gets a completely new twist. It's a very, very different way of thinking about it. Now, I'm not looking at physical objects like silicon circuits or neural circuits as fundamental reality. I'm viewing them as interface descriptions of a deeper reality, right? And in particular, my interface, it's a visualization tool for interacting with consciousness in the framework that I'm talking about. So I'm looking at you, I'm looking at, Sinan and Turkan, and I have an interface symbol that's giving me access to your consciousness. Fallible, but genuine. I can tell if you're bored or if you're interested. I mean, if you smile, I can guess that you're happy. If you're frowning, I can guess that you're unhappy. So I have an interface symbol that gives me access to consciousness. So here's a different way of thinking about AI and consciousness. So first, our interface does give us portals into consciousness. The human body, for example. Your body that I see is my portal into your consciousness. Here's the question. If we understand our interface precisely enough, can we reverse engineer that interface to open up new portals into the realm of conscious agents? For what it's worth, I think the answer is yes.
Like the
And the
wormholes.
technology, that's right. Well, well, by the way, we know how to create new portals into consciousness right now using current technology. It's called having kids.
Yeah.
Right? That's how we open up new portals into consciousness, right? It's a fairly low technology away, but it works. That's how we get new portals into consciousness. So the question is, we know that there are certain things that we can do in space and time that create new portals into consciousness, right? We know one way. We only know one way. The question is, once we reversed engineer our interface, will we then discover new ways to open up portals? And perhaps, by the way, I think we will. And I think some of the technology may look like circuits and software, but it will be what we might call an artificial intelligence. But now notice what's going on here. It's completely different than the standard AI view. Instead of starting with unconscious circuits and software and somehow getting the right complexity such that consciousness emerges, we're starting with consciousness. We're using circuits and software. That's just our user interface description of the tools we're using to open up a new portal into the realm of conscious agents that was already there. So the answer is yes. I think AIs will lead to consciousness, but it's in a completely different framework than the standard framework.
Hey guys, listeners, someone should make a movie about this. It's so exciting. Let's make some movies. Very, very nice, by the way. I'm blown away by the idea.
Yeah.
Nice.
Well, go ahead. Did we cut you off? Donald, do you want to continue? But because I have a nice question here about death from Aisha Horton. She's asking, can death be defined as getting trapped in consciousness, like defining brain death as closing the gate between the consciousness and the space-time? Yeah? What do you think?
Well, here's a good metaphor for death. And again, by the way, it's just a metaphor. It's just to stimulate ideas. And I'm always putting this out in the spirit of, I'm hoping the next generation will take these ideas as inspiration, not as dogma, and then show me where I'm wrong or show me where these ideas can be elaborated into something better. But here's the idea, and then run with it where you will. Suppose that you go with your friends to a virtual reality arcade to play virtual volleyball. You put on your headset and bodysuit, and you find yourself immersed in a beach volleyball scene. So you see the palm trees and the sand, the net, and you see your friends in virtual bathing suits playing volleyball with you. And so you start to play volleyball for a while. And then one of your friends, Susan, she says, I'm thirsty, I need to get a drink. And so she takes off her headset and bodysuit to go get a drink. And her avatar collapses motionless on the sand. Well, from the point of view of the VR game, she's dead. But she's not dead. She just stepped out of the bodysuit and the headset. And so is death simply stepping out of this particular space-time user interface, sort of a shared game virtual reality that we have, and moving on to another part of Gödel's candy store? Quite possibly.
Awesome. But this can easily become a dogma, by the way. So relaxing. It's so relaxing.
Well, all the hard work is ahead.
Yes, yeah.
Can I continue with the questions from audiences, Sinan, or do you have a question here?
Yes.
Because I have...
No, actually, I can leave this space for the audience, but let's not make Donald so tired. Maybe next time he could think twice before coming to this channel.
Yeah, maybe one more question. One last question.
One more question will be
one
sufficient.
more question, and then it's time for my lunch.
Okay. Tunca Yalçın, can the artistic creativity be about a lofty real knowledge emerging from our consciousness? Creativity and consciousness, I guess.
So can artistic creativity
be about real knowledge emerging from our consciousness?
I see. Well, that's an interesting question because from the way I've described this exploration of Gödel's candy store, you might think I'm saying, oh, it's only for scientists and geeks, but art, literature, humanities, sports, these are all ways of exploring different parts of the infinite Gödel's candy store. And so artistic creativity is just as legitimate and valuable and wonderful exploration as Einstein's exploration. These are different directions, and so I value them all equally, and they're all part of the whole exploration. So I definitely, when I've encouraged the younger generation to learn mathematics, that's for those who want to develop the science of this conscious agent stuff and so forth. But there's infinitely many other ways for us to just do the exploration of consciousness, which is, I think, what it's all about. And so artistic creativity, musical creativity, painting, and so forth, photography. I like to do photography. I'm no good, but it's fun. So those are all ways, and equally legitimate and worthwhile ways of exploring all the infinite possibilities of consciousness. And so absolutely, yes, I would agree.
I must say just one final word. It's almost 2 hours now. And you said about something about creativity and poetry and literature and so on. When I look back 2 hours before, I have a taste in my mind right now. So it was not like a scientific, discussion or something. It's more like poetry. It's more like, watching a movie. So it just leave me a taste. Thank you very much for this. Thank you very much for being with us. And I want to thank you for including us in your interface, and thank you very much for coming into our interface. And that was a very, very special meeting. Thank you very much for all of this.
And thank you for inviting me. This has been a lot of fun, and it's very, very kind of you to have me. So thank you very much.
And you have a social media, maybe you have a Twitter and all that. Maybe I can even send you those questions that we got. Every once in a while, you can tweet some answers there. People follow and maybe get some answers with it. And do you want to mention, or we can put it in the link, right?
I've got a Twitter so that you can send them the handle, my Twitter handle, and people can. And I usually post links to my talks and papers on Twitter so people can see my latest papers and so forth on that. So absolutely. And I can. I don't do a lot of conversation on Twitter, but I do answer a question now and then. Absolutely.
Okay.
I can say hi time to time from Twitter to you. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
I want to say one thing. I got this from your book. It's Einstein's also, but it was English, it was Turkish in your book, but reality is merely an illusion, albeit a very persistent one. I just wanted to finish with this line.
That's great.
That's right. Yes. Okay. Thank you very much for everyone for being with us. Bye-bye. Good night.
Bye-bye.
Have a good day.
Thank you. Bye.